It's old, it's canvas, it smells like a warehouse in Guangdong, but with a few mods, it just might earn a place in your kit. I'm Aramid, and welcome to Cheeki Breeki Tactical. The Chinese Chicom chest rig, officially known as the Type 56, was issued with the Type 56 AK rifle since, you guessed it, 1956. I think there were several patterns, but the 3-swell version is probably the most prolific. The thing about them is that they were produced in atrocious amounts, and you can pick one up approximately for the price of a shawarma on any continent. The rig was made to hold 3 7.62 AK magazines, a couple grenades and an oil can. It's perfect! It's all you need! If you live in 1967. The Chicom is actually pretty impressive for how old it is, but there were a number of serious flaws which we needed to address in order to turn it from yobanый урод into Cheeki Breeki. First of all, the straps were clearly designed by people who never wore backpacks. And there was no adjustability either, you wear it their way, or you don't. In order to simply put it on, you need to figure out 2 D-ring buckles and tie a knot behind your back. I wish I was joking. Second of all, there was zero retention. Mags fell out faster than NATO morale, unless you use the buttons of course. Pouches are closed with wooden buttons that take a while to actually undo, which is obviously a big problem. In reality, people often just ignore the buttons and run the flaps loose, while there's no other kind of retention by design. And finally, it's a piece of canvas. It absorbs oil, sweat, tears, regret, but what it did not absorb, unfortunately, was an adequate combat load. As I said, you're limited to 3 magazines and a couple grenades. If you're on the Chicom with 5.56 or 5.45 magazines, there are things you can do to stretch out the pouches and increase the capacity. But if you're like me and run 7.62 curved magazines, you will have to live with this. It is a Cold War icon, and like most Cold War icons, it needs a little Slavic magic to function in the 21st century. In fact, during many conflicts in history, soldiers field-modded these rigs with rubber bands, zip ties, and sometimes sheer spite of class struggle. Following their footprints, it makes sense for us to show newcomers what kind of simple modifications and improvements we came up with to give this piece of canvas a second life. Having a pretty solid idea of what we wanted to do, we stocked up on the essentials. Cheap Velcro, Fastex buckles, and naturally some good old electric tape. All of this barely cost us a few dollars, making this a true budget modification. To address the screaming lack of adjustability, we added proper Fastex buckles to both ends of the rear strap. There are definitely more elegant ways to make this setup fully adjustable, but we just measured out a comfortable fit, centered everything, and fixed the loose ends with electric tape of course. Not perfect, but at least now I don't need to tie butterfly knots under fire. To add a quick release feature of sorts, we decided to install buckles in place of the original D-rings, for a bit more flexibility. The Fastex we got did not come with openings, so the simple solution was to make them ourselves, which took a little filing, and then a little more filing, eventually getting the job done. They turned out alright, and we were finally able to mount them without damaging the rig, which was of course easier said than done, блять. But once the adjustments were in place, all the strands were rolled up neatly and locked down with tape. This solution also frees up the D-rings for other purposes. We live in an era where even fanny packs have MOLLE interfaces, so this kind of tactical versatility is non-negotiable. Next, we moved on to improving magazine retention and overall pouch usability by adding Velcro closures. We went for basic self-gluing Velcro panels, cut them to size, and slapped them onto the pouches where it made sense. In an ideal world, you would absolutely want to reinforce these, be it with stitching or with proper cobbler's glue, but since this was just a stupid experiment and we still want the option to return the rig to stock for future projects, we gave it a shot as is. I honestly don't know what we were thinking. But how's it supposed to help anyways, you ask? Simple. It gives you an alternative to the slow, fiddly buttons. You can just slap your magazines in place with something instead of, well, nothing. Because losing a magazine in the woods is funny, right until we have to tell Comrade Lieutenant. One of the smaller pouches was destined to hold medical supplies, so we slapped on a Velcro panel right on the flap for a small medical patch. Clean, simple, and it gives the tiny pouch a sense of purpose. Speaking of medical, to at least somewhat expand the practical capacity of the setup, we added a loop for a tourniquet. The tourniquet loop we used has a velcro base, so we took a pair of matching panels, lined everything up using the rig stitching as a guide, centered it, and pressed it all down in one go. The trick is to make sure that the soft side of the velcro faces you, that way you avoid the rough side with the hooks that likes to snag on things. The best place we found for it was dead center right at the bottom, and the so-called life zone, where it is accessible by both hands. With all the modifications complete, the rig was already looking much more solid. But more importantly, we wanted to see just how much gear we could actually cram into it with the new configuration. And practice shows that if you believe hard enough, you can actually fit your combat load, including 3 magazines and the grenade, plus a small IFAK with shears on a keeper and a chem light, a tourniquet, a radio, a pair of gloves on a carabiner, and an oil can with a cleaning kit, which, let's be honest, you could easily swap out for a multi-tool or a snack. Is this impressive? For a Chicom, absolutely. Now, let's see if this old chest rig can hold up after 50 years and some Gopnik ingenuity.
Место!
This is definitely not a CryGPC, but for the price of a Cheburek, I think it's doing alright. One thing I need to say is that if you ever try to recreate anything like this, make sure to actually stitch through the Velcro panels, because otherwise you will be putting optics on them. What can I say? The Chicom will never be perfect, but with some love, duct tape, and Gopnik ingenuity, it can be useful, and that is what Cheeki Breeki Tactical is all about. If you have modded your own Chicoms, or used them in any way, make sure to send them in for the next Gopnik inspection video. Otherwise, subscribe for more surplus, salvation, and see you in the next video. Dlya.